You know what's funny? Society spends your whole life teaching you to be afraid of losing things. Your job, your girl, your reputation, your money. And then life comes along and takes it all anyway. But here's what nobody tells you about hitting rock bottom. It's the most liberating thing that'll ever happen to you. Picture this. You're sitting in your car outside your old office building. The same building where you used to stress about meetings, kiss ass to get promoted, and pretend to laugh at your boss's terrible jokes. Except now you're just watching people rush around like ants, and you're thinking, man, I used to be one of those people. You used to care about their approval. You used to need their validation. You used to be afraid of what they'd think if you spoke your mind. But something shifted when you lost it all. Something dangerous. So tell me, when was the last time you said exactly what you thought without calculating the cost? When did you stop editing yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you anyway? Here's the brutal truth most men never want to face. You've been living your entire life as a hostage to your own attachments. You think you're building something solid, but you're actually building a prison. Every possession you acquire, every relationship you desperately try to maintain, every piece of your identity you cling to, it's all just another chain around your neck. And the irony? The very things you think make you strong are what make you weak. That job you're afraid to lose, it's keeping you from taking the risks that could actually change your life. That relationship you're walking on eggshells to preserve, it's turning you into a shadow of who you used to be. That reputation you're so carefully protecting, it's stopping you from saying what needs to be said. Most guys spend decades accumulating stuff they think defines them. The right car, the right house, the right woman, the right circle of friends. They measure their worth by what they have, not who they are. And then they wonder why they feel empty inside. They wonder why they can't sleep at night. They wonder why they look in the mirror and don't recognize the person staring back. But when you lose it all, and I mean really lose it, not just have a bad month, something shifts. The mask comes off. The performance ends. And for the first time in years, maybe decades, you get to meet yourself again. The real you. Not the version you've been presenting to the world. Not the guy who says what people want to hear. The guy who's been sitting in the passenger seat of his own life, watching someone else drive. Friedrich Nietzsche understood this better than most. He wrote about the concept of amor fati, love of fate. Not just accepting what happens to you, but embracing it. Especially the hard stuff, especially the losses, because those losses, they're not punishments. They're revelations. They strip away everything that was never really you to begin with. Nietzsche knew that most people live what he called slave morality. They define themselves by what others think, what others want, what others approve of. They're constantly seeking validation from a world that doesn't even know who they really are. But when you lose everything that gave you external validation, you're forced to find something deeper. You're forced to build your worth from the inside out. The ancient Stoics had a similar understanding. Marcus Aurelius, who literally had everything, power, wealth, respect, still wrote about the importance of not being attached to outcomes. He knew that real strength comes from your ability to remain yourself regardless of what you have or don't have. Seneca, who lost his fortune multiple times, wrote that the man who has lost everything has also lost all his fears, because what else can they take from you? But here's where it gets interesting. In Eastern philosophy, there's this concept called mu, emptiness or nothingness. But it's not emptiness as in lacking something. It's emptiness as in having space. Space to choose, space to move, space to become whatever you decide to be next. When you're full of attachments, there's no room for growth. When you're empty, everything becomes possible. The modern world has forgotten this wisdom. We've been conditioned to believe that accumulation equals success, that having more means being more. But every wise tradition throughout history has pointed to the opposite truth. Real power comes from needing less, not having more. First truth: your comfort zone isn't comfortable. It's a slow death. You think you're playing it safe, but you're actually suffocating yourself, one compromise at a time. Every time you bite your tongue to keep the peace, every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you shrink yourself to fit into someone else's idea of who you should be, you're choosing a kind of living death. And the crazy part? You think you're being responsible. You think you're being mature. But there's nothing mature about betraying yourself every single day. I've watched grown men turn into ghosts of themselves because they were afraid of losing what they had. They stopped taking risks. They stopped speaking their truth. They stopped dreaming big because dreams require the possibility of failure, and failure might cost them their precious security. So they chose the slow fade instead of the honest fight. They chose the safe lie instead of the dangerous truth. Second truth: the people who claim to love you while you're successful will disappear faster than your bank account when things go south. And you know what? Good, because those weren't real relationships anyway. They were transactions. You were paying for their presence with your success, your resources, your usefulness. When the payments stopped, so did they. But here's the gift in that loss. You finally get to see who was actually there for you versus who was there for what you could provide. Real relationships survive storms. They survive loss. They survive you being broke, angry, confused, and figuring things out. The relationships that don't survive those things, they were never real to begin with. They were just mutually beneficial arrangements disguised as love. And losing those fake connections clears the space for authentic ones. Third truth: your biggest failures are usually your biggest favors. That job you got fired from, it was probably killing your soul anyway. That relationship that ended, it was probably keeping you from becoming who you're meant to be. That business that went under, it was probably built on the wrong foundation anyway. But you couldn't see it at the time because you were too attached to the outcome to see the truth. Failure has a way of showing you what actually matters. When everything falls apart, you get to see what remains. And what remains is usually the stuff that was worth keeping all along. Your character, your resilience, your ability to start over, your capacity to learn and adapt. These things can't be taken from you. They can only be strengthened by adversity. If you keep living your life afraid of losing what you have, you'll never discover what you're actually capable of. You'll spend your entire existence playing defense instead of offense. You'll die with your music still in you, as they say. And the worst part? You'll know it, deep down, in those quiet moments when you're alone with your thoughts. You'll know you chose safety over truth. You'll know you chose comfort over growth. You'll know you chose other people's approval over your own integrity. I've seen this happen to too many good men. They reach their 40s or 50s and suddenly realize they've been living someone else's life. They've been following someone else's script. They've been trying to meet someone else's expectations for so long that they forgot what they actually wanted. And by then, they think it's too late to change. They think they're too invested in the lie to start living the truth. But it gets worse. When you live your life afraid of loss, you become controllable. People figure out what you're afraid of losing and they use it against you. Your boss knows you need the job, so he treats you like garbage. Your partner knows you're afraid of being alone, so she stops respecting you. Your friends know you need their approval, so they take you for granted. You become a puppet in your own life, and everyone else is pulling the strings. The fear of loss doesn't just limit your potential, it corrupts your character. You start making compromises that feel small in the moment, but add up to something ugly over time. You start saying things you don't mean. You start doing things that go against your values. You start becoming someone you don't recognize. And eventually, you look in the mirror and realize you've lost the most important thing of all, yourself. And here's the cruelest irony. The very things you're afraid of losing will eventually be lost anyway. That job? You'll retire or get replaced eventually. That relationship? One of you will die first. That money? You can't take it with you. That reputation? Nobody will remember it a generation from now. You're clinging to things that are temporary by nature, and in the process, you're sacrificing the one thing that could actually last, who you really are. First, start practicing small losses. Don't wait for life to take everything from you. Start letting go of things voluntarily. Cancel that subscription you don't really need. Delete that social media app that's eating your time. Stop going to events you don't actually enjoy just because you think you should. Say no to invitations that don't align with who you're becoming. These small acts of letting go will build your tolerance for bigger losses. They'll show you that you can survive and even thrive with less than you think you need. This isn't about becoming a minimalist monk or rejecting all worldly pleasures. It's about distinguishing between what you want and what you think you're supposed to want. It's about figuring out which parts of your life are actually yours and which parts you inherited from other people's expectations. When you voluntarily let go of things that don't serve you, you reclaim the power to choose what does. Second, stop seeking validation from people who don't know the real you. This is a hard one because we're social creatures and we naturally want to belong. But there's a difference between healthy connection and validation addiction. Healthy connection happens when you show up as yourself and attract people who appreciate that authentic version. Validation addiction happens when you perform a version of yourself that you think others will approve of. Pay attention to how you feel after spending time with different people. Do you feel more like yourself or less like yourself? Do you feel energized or drained? Do you feel seen or used? The people who make you feel more like yourself, those are your people. The ones who require you to be someone else to earn their approval, those aren't your people, no matter how successful or popular they might be. Third, build something that can't be taken from you. This isn't about hoarding money or accumulating possessions. This is about developing skills, knowledge, and character traits that belong to you regardless of your circumstances. Learn to think clearly under pressure. Develop the ability to speak truth even when it's uncomfortable. Build the capacity to start over when necessary. Cultivate relationships based on mutual respect rather than mutual need. The strongest men I know aren't the ones with the most stuff. They're the ones who could lose everything tomorrow and still be fundamentally okay. Not because they don't care about anything, but because their sense of worth isn't dependent on external circumstances. They've built their identity on solid ground, on who they are, not what they have. Fourth, practice saying what you actually think. Start small. When someone asks for your opinion, give your real opinion instead of the one you think they want to hear. When someone suggests a plan you don't like, say so. When someone treats you in a way that doesn't feel right, address it. This isn't about being difficult or confrontational. It's about being honest. It's about showing up as yourself instead of as a carefully curated version designed to avoid conflict. You'll be surprised how many problems solve themselves when you start speaking truthfully. You'll also be surprised how much respect you gain from people who matter. Sure, some people won't like it. Some people prefer the fake version of you because it's easier for them to control. But those aren't your people anyway. The right people will appreciate your honesty, even when they don't agree with your opinion. Here's what nobody tells you about losing everything. It's not the end of your story. It's the beginning. When all the bullshit gets stripped away, the pretense, the performance, the desperate clinging to things that were never really yours. What's left is pure potential. What's left is a man with nothing to lose and everything to gain. What's left is dangerous, but dangerous in the best possible way. Dangerous to mediocrity, dangerous to fake relationships, dangerous to systems that depend on your compliance, dangerous to anyone who's been taking advantage of your fear. When you stop being afraid of loss, you stop being controllable. When you stop being controllable, you become powerful. Not power over others, power over yourself. I've watched men transform completely after losing everything. The guy who got fired from his corporate job and finally started the business he'd been dreaming about for years. The man whose marriage ended and who discovered he'd been living for someone else's happiness instead of his own. The father whose kids grew up and moved away and who realized he'd forgotten who he was beyond being a provider. These men didn't become bitter or broken. They became focused. They became clear. They became unstoppable. Because when you have nothing left to lose, every choice becomes strategic instead of defensive. Every move becomes intentional instead of reactive. Every day becomes about building something real instead of protecting something false. Have you ever noticed how the most confident people you know are usually the ones who've been through some serious stuff? They're not confident because everything's always gone their way. They're confident because they've learned they can handle whatever life throws at them. They've tested themselves against real adversity and come out stronger. They know what they're made of because they've been forced to find out. So here's the bottom line. You can keep living your life afraid of losing what you have, or you can start living like a man who's already lost everything and discovered he's still standing. You can keep playing defense, trying to protect a life that's slowly suffocating you, or you can go on offense and build something that actually matters to you. The choice is yours, but understand this. Staying safe isn't actually safe. It's just a slower way of dying. The real risk isn't in losing what you have. The real risk is in never discovering what you're capable of when you stop being afraid. What about you? Are you ready to stop playing it safe and start playing for real? Or are you going to keep pretending that your comfortable prison is actually freedom? If this hit home for you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because we're just getting started on this journey of becoming who you're actually meant to be. And make sure you watch the next video that pops up. Trust me, you're going to want to see what comes next. Until then, keep your eyes open and your guard up. I'll see you in the next one.